I have dealt with a lot of clients over the course of my career, and you'd be very surprised by how many clients, big and small, and I'm talking about brands that are multi-billion dollar Fortune 100 companies, down to your mom and pop e-commerce boutiques, budgets that range from $2,000 a month, even less, to $200 million annually. So like quite a range. And you'd be surprised how few points of contact, directors, managers that I interface with that know their numbers. You need to know your basic figures. If you're going to run profitable performance advertising campaigns on Google, Meta, TikTok, when ChatGPT rolls it out, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything, if you're going to run successful campaigns and understand how to optimize, you need to know your basic numbers. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be a mathematician. You don't need to be a statistician. Every single employee, every single account manager that comes to work at Adventure Media needs to learn these figures, whether it's somebody who works in copywriting, somebody who works in data, somebody who works in sales, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I want to teach you some of the important figures and numbers you need to understand. And then I'm going to show you a calculator that we built that you're going to have access to for free. And just a word on why this is important. Every digital marketing campaign begins with a starting point. You can call it a set of hypotheses. You could call it a set of guesses. You're sort of faced with an overwhelming amount of options. You'll see, if you run Google Ads campaigns or Meta campaigns, like it's just endless. How many different targeting parameters I could combine with different audiences, how many different keywords I could choose, and different bidding strategies, and ad group tests, and campaign experiments, and A/B tests, and should I pin my headlines, should I not pin my headlines, how much budget should I go to, whatever. Okay, so like those are all great questions. And we're going to focus on those questions, and we'll get there. Like that's like pragmatic management and optimization strategy. But like much higher level is what needs to happen for me to achieve what we define as good, successful advertising. What needs to happen for me to be making money? And then that could be distilled into a very simple, like imagine a little machine. It's like money comes in this way and money comes out that way. And more money has to come out, which means I need to understand the metrics that govern all of the little things that are happening inside this machine. There's a click happening. There's a visit to my website happening. There's somebody navigating to a contact page or adding an item to the cart. And then hopefully there's somebody checking out. So what are all the different actual things that have to take place in order for me to generate money on the other side of that machine? And I need to understand what those things, those percentages, those figures, those CPCs, what they have to be in order for us to be profitable. And it's easy. Like these are easy formulas to learn. You have a calculator, but you have to like understand them because you need to ask the right questions. So let's talk about break-even CPA. CPA stands for cost per acquisition. Some people write it or talk about it as CPC, cost per conversion, but we don't do that because that sounds like cost per click. It's too confusing. So we say CPA, cost per acquisition. Now, an acquisition doesn't necessarily mean a sale, right? So this is where people often get a little bit confused. An acquisition is any action that is meaningful that you're tracking. So we're going to get into conversion tracking, and there's a lot of content on setting up conversion tracking and how to manage your conversion tracking properly, how to diagnose it. But what's a conversion? So a conversion is at the end of the story, at the end of the customer journey. A conversion is a sale, right? A conversion, let's say you're an e-commerce store and you sell sneakers. A conversion is somebody checking out, successfully purchasing a pair of sneakers. That's a conversion. Acquisition and conversion are synonymous. If you're a lead gen business, if you're a service business, if you're a plumber, or you're a florist, or you're an accountant, or a lawyer, or a doctor, or whatever, then for you, a conversion might be somebody filling out a form. It might be somebody making a phone call, right? Those are like the closest actions to revenue that you could track online on sort of that first visit when you're a service-based business. But there's also what we call secondary conversion actions, where somebody who visits a page more than 3 times, for example, or somebody who scrolls a certain depth of a page, or somebody who views a key page, or somebody who downloads a case study, or somebody who downloads a white paper, okay, or somebody who adds an item to their cart. These are all secondary acquisition actions. And If I'm looking at an acquisition action that's important, then I should be able to understand my break-even CPA for that action. And we'll talk about it. We'll talk about how that relates to an e-commerce business and how it relates to a service-based lead gen business. But at a very simple level, your break-even cost per acquisition is the profit you make on a sale. It's as simple as that. Okay? So you take your revenue and you subtract your costs. So you see on the slide it says COGS. That stands for cost of goods sold. It's a fancy way of saying, like, what does it cost you to actually ship, produce, deliver the service? It's harder to figure out when you're a service-based business, but ballparks are okay. Another sort of rule of thumb is not to let perfect be the enemy of good. So if you're like, I don't know, we're an agency, for example, right? So I know what our payroll is. I know what our numbers are. I know how many hours roughly we allocate to each client. But like, do I really know what it costs me to deliver 1 month of service to this particular client out of 150 clients? No, I do not. I really don't. I can give you a ballpark, like a rough range, and that's good enough. Because that rough range allows me to understand what I would be willing to pay for a lead, for a form submission. It would give me a sense of what the most break even is, the most I would pay for a lead before I would start losing money. Okay, so like ballparks are fine. E-commerce is easier. E-commerce, you see your checkout value, and you should basically understand what your shipping costs are, your manufacturing costs are, your material and labor costs are. And the other thing I would say is, like, don't get so neurotic here. Because when you're trying to figure out profit, do you take into account your rent and your electrical bill and the one time you had this like accountant a year ago or this consultant? It's like, just chill out, relax. You're looking to get a basic break-even CPA. It's a starting point. It's a North Star. So here's a very simple example with very simple figures, very simple math. I have a cup of lemonade, I guess. And it's $2, right? You have a cup. This is what I sell. I'm running a lemonade stand. And I know that for every $2 lemonade sale that I generate, I paid $1 in materials. A lemon, and I paid for sugar. And there's a lot of sugar in lemonade. So it was $1. Okay. So I have what is my margin? A 50% margin. $2 is my revenue per cup of lemonade sold. $1 is my COGS, my cost of goods sold, or my cost to fulfill the product. Over here, there's no shipping cost. It's a lemonade stand on the side of the road. Great. So my break-even CPA is very simple. It's $1, right? It's the revenue I generate for a sale minus the costs of getting that item into a customer's hand, including the materials, manufacturing, labor, shipping. If it's a service-based business, it's the machinery, it's the technology, right? Okay, now you might be wondering, say you're a service-based business and you pay for a CRM. You might pay $20,000 a year for HubSpot or Salesforce or some other CRM. And you have 100 customers, but like you needed that software for your first 20 customers. So is customer 21 to 100 now a higher margin customer because you don't have to attribute any of your software fees to those 80 customers and you're only splitting out that $20,000 to your first 20 customers? And that's a great question, but it's not a question for now. Depending on what you're looking for, what information you want, you might look at it differently. You might take that $20,000 annual fee and spread it out across all 100 customers. You might not incorporate it at all. You might attribute it just to your first 20 customers. It's not a question for now. When we're looking for break-even CPA, if you do not have to pay more software cost for that additional customer, then you don't need to include it and you shouldn't include it in understanding your go-forward break-even CPA. Because you're already spending that money on your rent, you're already spending that money on your software. You should be just including what we call variable costs, costs that increase for every single unit sold. So in this case, I'm not including the price that the table cost to put the lemonade stand on. I'm not including the cost of gas it took to get to the location. I'm just including the variable costs that go into every single unit. This is unit economics that goes into every unit of lemonade sold. So it's the sugar and it's the actual lemons. Great. So my break-even CPA is $1. And if I spend $10 on advertising, I need to generate 10 customers. The 10 customers will give me $20 in revenue. And as we know, I've spent $10 on advertising. Out of the $20 in revenue, I have $10 of profit, right? Because I know my margins are 50%. And at break even, I'm left with zero. Break even CPA means what can you spend to acquire a customer to get to zero? And in this case, if I spend $1 in advertising costs to get every single customer, I'm going to wind up with zero. So if I spent $10 and generated 10 customers and I sold them 10 $2 cups of lemonade, I walk away at the end of the day with $0. That's my break-even CPA. I know it's like I'm going on a lot about break-even CPA, but it's important to know. There are 3 important levers, optimizations, and these are sort of your guiding principles for everything you do. When you're looking to control profitability, the most dramatic, significant impact to profitability will come from these 3 metrics. Your CPC, which is your cost per click or your cost per session, right? A click on a digital ad will lead that user typically to your landing page, to your website. Not always. Sometimes you're running a campaign to generate more followers on a social media account or more views on a YouTube video. Okay, fine. We'll talk about CPMs and impressions, but like your fundamental click, if you're looking at Amazon, Google Shopping, Google Search, Meta, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, you're driving a click to a destination where you're hoping on that destination, some revenue generating action will occur. So your cost per click, how much it costs you to get that person to your site. That's a very important figure. Your conversion rate, the percentage. Now, people make this mistake all the time. The conversion rate is not the amount of people who convert. Your conversion rate is the percentage of people who convert. So if I have 100 clicks and I have 1 conversion, what's my conversion rate? 1%. If I have 7 conversions, my conversion rate is 7%. Fine, conversion rate. So the percentage of people, right? So like if I get 100 clicks and I spend $100, for example, if my CPC is $1, and I get 1 conversion, what's my CPA? $100. I spent $100 to get those clicks and I got 1 conversion. My CPA is $1. But if I double that conversion rate to 2% and I get 2 conversions out of that 100, my CPA plummeted by half. I've now spent $50 to acquire the customer. So if my profit was $60 per unit sold, in example 1, I'm losing money, hand over fist. And in example 2, I've made money. At a 1% conversion rate, I'm losing money. At a 2% conversion rate, I'm profitable. So your conversion rate has a very dramatic impact on the profitability of your campaigns. And that shouldn't be ignored because people often just get so deep into Google and into Facebook and into the campaigns and into their creative, but they ignore optimizing for the customer experience after the click. And that all happens, and conversion rate is going to be most significantly impacted not by campaign optimizations necessarily, but by what you say on your landing page and the experience you give your customers. And 3 is your average order value. Generating more money per order, or your lifetime value, generating more orders over the course of a customer lifetime is going to allow you to bid more aggressively. It's going to allow you to tolerate a less than ideal conversion rate, and you're going to make more money, right? So as your average order value goes up, and this is another important thing to think about when you think about how am I a more well-rounded marketer, I understand acquisition. Okay, that's cost per click. I understand customer experience. That's conversion rate. And I understand business strategy. That's average order value. How to price, how to extract more revenue, how to engender loyalty. Okay, we'll get to all those things. So we talked about break-even CPA. We talked about these 3 metrics. Now look at this chart. It's very interesting. I want to show you a couple things. Over here on the left side column, you have just example advertisers, five random people. And look at some of these metrics. We have CPS, cost per session, or this could be cost per click, because getting somebody to your site is not only done through digital advertising. It can be done through an email campaign. It can be done through an organic post. It can be done through an influencer. Okay, cost per session, how much you've invested in every website visit. Your conversion rate, average order value, and then we get your number of clicks. Total spend, which is arbitrary. And notice how I didn't say total spend is one of the core fundamental metrics. Of course, how much you spend has a dramatic impact, but that's an easily shiftable figure. It's not strategic necessarily. And then you get your number of conversions, total revenue, and ROAS. But look at advertiser D. He has a 75-cent CPC, a 2.5% conversion rate, but his average order value is lower. It's $55. It's the second lowest on the chart compared to $65, 70, 60. But look at his ROAS. He's almost doubling. His income is almost double his ad spend. He's doing more revenue than advertiser E with a $65 AOV and advertiser C with a $70 AOV. Why? Because his CPC is lower and his conversion rate is higher. So you'll see how, if you just sort of study this chart a little bit, you'll see how dramatically important cost per session, conversion rate, and average order value are to the money you come home with at the end of the day. Now, let's talk about ROAS. You've heard the term ROAS, return on ad spend. It's an important metric for you to understand. And ROAS asks a very simple question. For every dollar you spend on advertising, how much money are you bringing in? That's when we talk about return. Now, why is this not ROI? Again, it's the same thing I said before. ROI is more complicated. You want to get a sense of like your general business profitability. You take into account your payroll. You take into account your utilities and your consulting contracts and everything. ROI, fine. But we're looking to make more profitable digital marketing campaigns, not necessarily to optimize an entire business. We want Google to be optimized. We want our traffic acquisition to work. We want to make more money from the advertising dollars we're investing. So we want to look at ROAS. And trust me, ROAS is plenty complicated, especially once you're advertising on multiple different platforms. And we'll get into attribution. We'll get into incrementality. It gets very muddy. It gets very complicated. It gets very ugly. But for now, that's the question. Okay, now, everyone needs to know this simple formula, okay? How to get your break-even return on ad spend. Now, your break-even return on ad spend is different than your break-even CPA. Your break-even CPA was simpler. It's like, I just need to know my revenue, like how much money I charge for the thing and how much the thing costs, and I subtract the cost of the thing from how much I charge for it, and that's my break-even CPA. That's how much I could spend, zero. In order to get your break-even ROAS, you need to know your average profit margin, okay? Which is not that complicated. Because if I know my profit, if I know what I charge, I know my revenue, and I know my profit, I know my margin. So if I have a $20 item and I'm generating $7 of profit, then 35, 36% roughly is my margin. You just do the division and you get your actual margin. Okay, now take your margin, you take one, the number one, it's always the number one, divided by your margin, that gives you your break-even ROAS, right? So if I have a 25% margin, okay, I sell something for $1 and my profit is 25 cents. It's a 25% margin. I know that my break-even ROAS is what? Do the math. 1 divided by 0.25 is, you guessed it, 400. So I need to generate $4 for every dollar I spend on marketing to break even, to walk away with nothing. And of course, the goal is not to walk away with nothing, but the point of understanding break even is I know where my pass fail is. I know where I'm losing money and I know where I'm making money. It's really as simple as that. If you know these figures, your break even CPA and your break even ROAS, and you know how to calculate them, you're already, I would say, based on my decade plus of experience, which I grant is not a lot, but I've worked with, 1,000 different clients, you're like in the top 10%. You're in the top 10%. Here's an example. Okay. Very similar to the example I just gave. You have a $20 book. Your cost to fulfill the product, the printing and the shipping is $7. You walk away, you're coming out with a $13, right? Remember, break-even CPA is $13. 20 minus 7 is 13. That gives me a 35% margin. Now, how do I get to 35%? Well, I take my cost, 7, divided by 20, divided by my revenue, right? So your cost divided by your revenue will give you your margin. You can multiply by 100 for as a percentage, you're going to get 0.35. So 35%. I have a 35% margin. Now we know I could just do 1 divided by 0.35. 1 divided by 35% is 2.86, which means for every dollar, and you need to practice talking about this in English. Find a kindergartner, find a little child, and explain this to them. Try to talk to them, try to find a first grader and explain to them the concept of a return on ad spend and what a break-even ROAS means. And when you could explain it to a first grader, okay, maybe not a first grader, like a third grader. Find a third grader and explain to them that at a 2.86 ROAS means that for every dollar I spend on advertising, I have to generate $2.86 back to break even, to come away with nothing, and give good examples, get your head around it, understand these numbers and these formulas on the back of your finger. Okay, I want to show you a calculator that we built just for you, and it's completely free, which is lovely, because free is good. So you could open up this calculator. You'll have a link to it right down below, and you could input your business metrics, and you can get a very clear sense of your ROAS, profit per sale, the amount of sessions and clicks you'll get, your break-even CPA. So for example, let's say I'm selling, let's go with a service. I'm a lawyer and my average profit is $35,000. My costs are quite high as an attorney. It's like $18,500. Now my cost per session, you want to look at your total market. It depends on how you're looking at this, but this could be your CPC, right? If you're looking just at Google, it would be your cost per click. If you're looking at a broader analytics setup, you're looking at your total investment for the month in marketing divided by the total amount of sessions you've received, right? So you could slice this in any number of ways. But let's say our cost per session was $150. My conversion rate, let's say, is 4%. And my monthly budget, let's say, is $250,000. So you look at the results and you see our current CPA based on our conversion rate is $37.50, highlighted in green because green is good, and this means in this scenario we're making money. Your break-even CPA would be $16,500, right? Your total price, like what you charge, your revenue minus your cost. We're going to get 1,666 sessions with a $250,000 budget and a $150 cost per session. We're going to get 66 new clients at a 9.33 ROAS. That means for every dollar we spend on Google or Meta or any of these platforms, I'm generating $9.33 in return at a $16,500 profit per sale. Wonderful, right? This is good. But now let's say my cost per session skyrocketed to $500. My ROAS goes to 2.8. If my cost per session in the legal world, which often is the case, we see many instances where CPCs or cost per sessions are well over $1,000. So you'll have a $22,500 actual CPA, but your break-even CPA is $16,500, which means you're losing money on every single client you bring in of those 11 clients, of those 277 sessions. So play around with this calculator. It's a good thing to have in your back pocket on a call, or if you're looking at just sort of drafting a media plan, and we're going to get into media planning in a moment. But I would say better to memorize these formulas so you fully understand, and you always sort of have an orientation wherever you are in your analysis. You can always and this is something I do personally all the time. If I'm like too deep into reports and to ad group structures and into campaign structure, and it's like just overwhelming. I'm looking at so many different creative things. Like sometimes I'll just zoom out and be like, okay, how much money did we spend? How much money did we make? What are the business economics that I know on the back of my finger, like the margin, break-even CPA, break-even ROAS, and it's just a gut check. And that number at a very high level might not always be significant. It might not always tell me exactly how to optimize, but it grounds me again. And I know like where knowing these figures shows me where to start looking and what types of things I need to look for. Do I need to get conservative? Do I need to potentially cut budget? If I have 10 minutes, I have to go to bed, or I have to go out to dinner, or like I just have too many other phone calls and I got to do something. Understanding the unit economics, the business metrics, the core goals, the break-even ROAS, the break-even CPA tells me what I need to do in a pinch when I don't have all the time to fully run through an optimization schedule. So now, before you spend any money on advertising, you know what your customer needs to be worth. You know what you could afford to spend, what your break-even CPA is, and you know which key metrics, AOV, conversion rate, cost per session, you need to optimize when your numbers aren't where they need to be, or if you believe that they can be better. In the next module, we're going to talk about mapping the funnel and getting an understanding of somebody very important we haven't spoken about yet, your customer. I'll see you there.